Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to the Freedom from the Press podcast. My name is Jason Robertson, and I'm here with my partner in crime.
Folks, Todd Peterson, thanks for joining us today. Jason, I am so excited for our episode. We have a very special guest, folks. This is how you drain the swamp one seat at a time.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the topics we've been really diving into, we are President Trump supporters on this show. We think we need America First candidates. We think our politicians are bought and paid for. But what we learned in 2016 is that even sending President Trump into Washington with Republicans having control of the House and Senate does not guarantee success for us, because we have to have politicians that are going to push through America First legislative things. And nothing was a living embodiment more than one of the most awful politicians I've ever seen, Mitt Romney.
Jason, I would love to do a brief recap of Mitt Romney. And folks, this is all on Wikipedia, public information from the left themselves. Here's a rundown of Romney and why he needs to go. And good news, he's not running for re-election, but he has supported people against our special guest today, reveal in just a second, that will do the exact same thing he has. So just as a reminder, Mitt Romney was just a handful of Republicans to let the impeachment trial go forward. Most Republicans refused to have that take place. Romney wanted impeachment 1 and impeachment 2. Romney was the first Republican senator to march with Black Lives Matter. He was one of the first to congratulate, actually the first Republican senator to congratulate Joe Biden and Kamala Harris when they were reelected. The list just goes on and on and on. Romney is the embodiment of the sellout RINOs. And Jason, to your point about Donald Trump in 2016, he exposed the media for what they are, but he also exposed the Republican Party for what it is too.
You know, and it's funny, growing up, I've always had conservative values. I thought people should work hard. Let's have a small government. But I hated the Republican Party because there were two wings. And it was the John McCain, let's go blow up another country wing. And it was the Mitt Romney, the country club Republicans that hate working class Americans, that make decisions to enrich themselves. And they just actively work against anything that's going to help the American people. And nothing embodied that wing of the Republican Party more than Mitt Romney.
And Jason, I think we should show the clip. I think we should bring our guest on and have a riveting conversation today about how to make this country great again.
Loving it.
Who do you like in the Republican field?
Anybody. I'd be happy to support virtually any one of the Republicans, maybe not Vivek, but the others that are running would be acceptable to me, and I'd be happy to vote for them. I'd be happy to vote for a number of the Democrats too. I mean, it would be an upgrade from, in my opinion, from Donald Trump and perhaps also from Joe Biden. Look, I like President Biden. I find him a very charming, engaging person. There's some places I agree with him, but most places I disagree with him. I think he's made all sorts of terrible mistakes, but I would like to see someone else run.
All right. And without further ado, Jason, you want to welcome our guest?
I was going to say, even before Mitt Romney said he wasn't running for re-election, Mayor Trent Staggs declared he was going to run for the Republican nomination for Senate in Utah, which I got to say, it's a 60% Republican state. If we can push him across the line in the primary, he's got a really good chance in the general. Mayor Staggs, welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Hey, great to be with you both.
Nice. Well, why don't we start with a little bit of background about yourself? Because we were talking a little pre-show, and I've shared this with people. Part of what's broken in the political system is you get all these people that come from big money or they're lifetime politicians, but you were just a normal guy 10, 15 years ago, raising a family, running a business. Why don't you give our audience some of your background?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I call myself an everyday Utahn, just average everyday Utahn. I from elementary school to graduate school, I've attended Utah schools. I've been here. This is my home, unlike Mitt Romney, who kind of parachuted in and, wanted to take on a Senate seat. I'm somebody who, was a part of a big family. I've got 7 sisters and 2 brothers. My dad started out as a high school teacher and football coach. We didn't have a lot of money, but we believed in America. We love this country. We love the Constitution, and we know that it's a meritocracy, or at least it used to be. Right? You can go ahead and rise up. by your bootstraps. And I think that's what's defined me in running, different businesses. I was able to get a graduate degree, an MBA, worked in the finance field, ran several companies, ended up taking an energy company public in the oil and gas space. And so I've also been endorsed by the Oil and Gas Workers Association of America. I want to have and see energy dominance like we had under President Trump. And then for the last 10, 11 years now, I've been running my community as a mayor of a city, a top 20 city by population in the state of Utah. But I try to apply common sense business measures to city or municipal government, and we've done it. I've been able to cut property taxes. We've basically had 0 fee increases over 10 years, which is great considering the inflationary environment we've been in. So time and time again, I've tried to take those business practices to city government, and then wanted to run for this office. About a year ago, made the decision May 23rd of last year, because that guy you put on at the beginning of this program, I said, we've got to have a new senator. It was my stated goal to primary Mitt Romney. Got in before anybody else that's now in this race, and we've overcome the odds to this point, and we've got just a couple of weeks left to win the primary. And Jason, as you so accurately said, in a state like Utah, this is really it. Whoever wins the Republican primary is undoubtedly going to be the next senator for the state of Utah.
Yeah, and absolutely. It's almost like having a business background, loving this country. I can think of another individual who has that same philosophy as you, Mr. Staggs. You got Trump's endorsement as well. Yeah. So congratulations on that. And just so our audience understands too, back in March, Romney did an interview where he said he would support either Brad Wilson or John Curtis to win that primary. I can't think of a better endorsement from Mitt Romney as well. Someone that actively is working against your campaign. I mean, that's such positive news for you. You're doing the right thing when establishment rhinos like Romney go after you in that sense by just ignoring your name.
Well, yeah, he just embodies, like you said, the establishment, everything that's wrong with the Republican Party. He supports Joe Biden 60% of the time. That's why I came out and said, enough is enough. That was our tagline. Enough is enough. Why I'm going to replace Mitt Romney. That was my opinion piece that I wrote. That was the title of really my launch video that's been viewed 1.5 million, 2 million times now. And I think people took note. They were like, who is this guy that is wanting to challenge and primary Mitt Romney? And we were able to get the endorsements of so many people like Mark Levin and Charlie Kirk and Kerry Lake and Senator Tuberville and Congressman Matt Gaetz and Andy Biggs, and then Senator Rand Paul recently. And then, of course, President Trump gave me a phone call April 27th, the morning of our state convention. It was incredible, phenomenal to get that phone call. And I've had a couple of conversations with him subsequent, but I was really honored to have that. I mean, here's a guy that, and myself, I don't have a lot of money. I'm not a multimillionaire. We've just worked incredibly hard with the grassroots across the state. We've got some amazing support. I think he recognized that. And with his endorsement, we won 70% of the delegates at the convention. And, pre-2015, we would have automatically been the Republican nominee in the general. And they came up with this RINO Protection Act, I call it, that allows people to buy their way on the ballot. And we've got that now, 3 people, really wealthy individuals that are all supported by super PACs. I mean, my biggest opponent, Congressman John Curtis, is supported by his billionaire buddies that have climate change PACs. It's unbelievable the amount of money that he's been helicoptering in, but we're still there. We're hanging in there. We're about 30 to 30% range for both of us, 30% undecided. The other 2 guys on the ballot are in single digits. So we've got one heck of an opportunity to bring someone like myself here into the Senate that is going to be an America First and a constitutional conservative. I've committed to join that Freedom Caucus equivalent of the Senate with Senator Tuberville and Mike Lee and Rand Paul and Rick Scott, Ron Johnson, all those guys. I'm ready to go. We're almost there. With this election, I think we could get the majority of the Republican caucus in the Senate. We could finally get a majority of folks that are America First in there, and that will be huge. We're going to have President Trump's back. We'll get in there and be able to make the change that I know Americans and especially Utahns desperately want and what they need.
You talked about the RINO Protection Act and letting people be able to buy their way on the ballot. Could you? People don't understand some of the nuts and bolts of politics.
Yeah.
Can you kind of explain at like a fifth grade level so I can understand what they did to make it so a candidate like yourself, because you crushed the delegates, you got 70%. This should be over. You should be the nominee. It shouldn't even be a thing.
That's right. And, really what happened is when Mike Lee won in 2010 and got into the U.S. Senate, he came in through the caucus convention crowd. That was uniquely the system in Utah. We have in March, usually the first week or so of March, there are 2,500 precincts designated across the state of Utah, Republican precincts. And they'll elect based on, the people you've got, the number of active Republicans in the precinct, they'll elect state delegates. There's about 4,000 state delegates. And if you get 60% or more, you get the endorsement of the party, and it used to be of the state party, and that you would also automatically be the nominee. Well, Mike Lee was able to win in 2010 and unseat a 3-term incumbent senator in Bob Bennett. And that really shook up the establishment here in the state of Utah. So they went ahead and they passed this bill that I don't know how it's frankly constitutional, that a legislature, a state legislature, can tell a private political party how they're going to nominate their candidates. But that's what happened. And so now people can just disregard the caucus system, the elected delegates, if they want to, altogether. They can just go ahead and get a number of signatures, buy their way on the ballot. And that's what we have today, where even though I got 70% of the delegates, and I believe that, yes, it should be over, we got 3 individuals, very wealthy, super wealthy individuals that have bought their way on the ballot. And like I said, one of them, probably my main competitor right now, is the one who has all these climate change PACs and all of his DC lobbyist insider folks that are just funneling money into this race.
And they don't want you to win.
No, they don't. They know I'm not the established. In fact, they thought they had an opportunity to take me out at the convention. They spent, just amongst 4,000 delegates, guys, they spent $40,000 or more in targeted mailers. You should see some of these things. They were out and out lies. They said I didn't support the cops. I mean, I'm endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police here in the state of Utah. And they were making up all kinds of things about me. I mean, just horrible. But that's what's so great about the caucus system. These delegates that are elected to represent their neighborhoods, they do their research, they do their homework. And so many of these things, all of them were so easily disproved. And with 4,000 people, I can field those phone calls and answer questions. Yeah. And so we were able to combat the dark money DC PAC, this dark money DC PAC that was attacking me nonstop for the last 2 weeks leading up to the convention.
I'm left shaking my head, and I'm trying to figure out if there's any other states like that, because I've never heard of a system like that where typically you go in, you get the delegates, you win the nomination, and yet here's a stopgap from the establishment to try to prevent someone outside of their control. I think it just shows the desperation the establishment is in at this point, too. And you talk about how much money is getting pumped into a Senate primary race. They're very afraid of you, and that makes me like you even more.
Yeah, it's a good $10 million that they put in these PACs. And, John Curtis was able to port over his congressional account, campaign account to a senatorial one. And, he's been playing the game there for 7-8 years and received all kinds of money. But this guy, let me just tell you, this is really it. This is what Utahns have in front of them. They can either completely dismantle the Romney legacy by electing me and having somebody who supports President Trump, or they're going to continue the Romney legacy and Mitt Romney 2.0. That's who John Curtis is. He is somebody in Congress. He was one of 30 Republicans or so that supported the January 6th committee. He supported the impeachment inquiry of President Trump. He censured President Trump on the House floor. And he chairs a climate caucus, is a Republican. Whereas you got me, who has endorsed President Trump. I was the first elected official in the state of Utah to endorse last year, immediately after I announced my candidacy. Yeah. And then, he's endorsed me. And then I have run a company, was on the board of directors of an oil and gas company. It's supported by the Oil and Gas Workers Association. I believe in energy dominance. I mean, it's diametrically opposed. You can't have two more different candidates. And this guy, by the way, he also chaired our second largest county in the state. He was the Democratic Party chair. He only switched party affiliation so that he could run for Jason Chaffetz's seat in 2017 when Chaffetz retired. We had a special election here. So this guy is not a Republican. He's a Republican in name only, and we've got to ensure that we beat him.
You know, it's funny you say that. Mike Lee is one of my favorite senators. Like, he is just, he's a tough cookie. He's what we need on the conservative side. He fights for American values. He fights for all those things. It's fascinating from an outsider perspective saying Utah's going to completely change their electoral process because they let based Mike Lee get into office. But as you look at what you're trying to do, so I don't know Utah residents. I know some people from Utah, and they tend to be much more from the outside as a MAGA Republican, more so than like the Mitt Romney country club Republicans, which is why I never understood why they supported Mitt. And now it makes more sense. The establishment was working for it. So what's your gut feel? Like, what percent of the Utah electorate is kind of that America first, kind of share the values that President Trump espouses?
Oh, I think it's a majority. I think it's, we're north of 50% of registered Republicans. We saw that at our caucus night. We didn't have a presidential primary election for registered Republicans. We had a preference poll. So those people that attended the caucus, which is probably 15 to 20% of registered Republicans, they'll participate in the caucus meetings in that night. But, President Trump won. He won this state, I think 55-45 with Nikki Haley. It was closer than I thought it would be, honestly. Right. But we have a number of Democrats that infiltrate our caucus system because they know in a state like Utah, that's probably their best chance to try to make themselves, try to change the outcome of an election. And so we have had that issue in our state where I would say probably 30% of registered Republicans are really full-on Democrats or incredibly moderate that just register as Republicans so they can try to vote in our close primary.
Yeah, you mentioned all this too, and I can't help but think back the 2022 midterm elections when Mitch McConnell seemed to have withheld money in Arizona, Nevada, Alaska. He didn't want MAGA senators to come and oust him of his comfy little, minority leadership position. Do you get a sense that this is happening again? Do you get a sense that there are Senate Republicans right now part of that PAC dark money that you're referencing? Do you get a sense that Mitch McConnell actively wants to keep, his cronies with him?
Absolutely. Yeah. And even though Mitch McConnell has said he's not seeking a leadership post, he's got a handpicked successor or those folks that want to be able to do it. And, Tommy Tuberville, when he came out here from Alabama to campaign with me, he said it very well. He said, guys, look, this is the problem. We only have 18 of 49 Republicans that are truly America first, and they're constitutional conservatives. They are part of what they call this executive steering committee, which is like the Freedom Caucus in the House. And so he said, that's why I'm out here today on my own dime. I'm campaigning for Trent because we need Trent. We need Kerry Lake in Arizona. We need Bernie Moreno in Ohio, Jim Banks in Indiana. There's several that have committed to join this executive steering committee. And we could actually this year in this election, we can get President Trump back in office and we can have a majority within our own caucus. And that will ensure straight away that we don't elect a Mitch McConnell 2.0 as a Senate majority leader. We get back to process. This is what Mike Lee has been railing on for a long time. He says, guys, we can't have this firm anymore with Senate and House leadership, 4 people that go in a back room, negotiate amongst themselves 1,000-page plus piece of legislation or the budget and these continuing resolution omnibus spending bills, and then slap it on the desks of members of Congress and say, all right, y'all have 24 hours to pass this thing or the government's going to shut down. Well, so be it. I wrote a contract with Utah, 7 points last fall. And one of them is I will not vote for an omnibus spending bill, period, because that just continues the problem. If we don't get back to process where we've got 12 appropriations subcommittees, each producing their own bills or budgets with debate and amendment amongst all the elected representatives, then we're just going to continue down this road. And that's why we haven't had a balanced budget since 2001.
I got to say that's going to have to be one of your biggest eye openers because you've run businesses. You do monthly budgeting. You have profit and loss statements. It blows me away that our federal government can't even execute the budgeting and appropriations process. And for you as a businessman, are you just going to show up and look at these folks like they're morons? Like, seriously, guys, like this is job one. We need to like set a budget, get it approved in time. We don't need to wait for the last minute to try to cram this down the Americans' people's throat. How are you going to approach that? And what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think it does need to be approached from a business person's perspective and mindset. That's what I would hope to do. You know, I'm just shocked that, you know, I've been talking to some policy people, you know, in this process, and they look at me and say, wow, you get elected, I think you will be the most knowledgeable person in this area. And it shocks me going, you got to be kidding me, right?
Right. I'm new here.
No, you would be. So we need more people like that. We need more people like that in office. And sadly, just the system and what me and my family have had to go through, quite frankly, this last year. Now I completely understand. I understand why so few good people want to run for office. I mean, it's not a fun experience. I'll be honest. It really not. You have to go out there, try to raise a ton of money, just to compete with all the outside interest money that's coming in, and you've got to open your life up. It becomes a fishbowl. You know, you get attacked on a bunch of nonsense, baseless things, and you do all this to, you know, go make a congressional salary, which, you know, I guess sounds okay at $170,000 a year, but, you know, you're maintaining 2 residences. I'd have to fly back. I mean, Mike Lee has been doing this for 13, 14 years now, where he leaves on a Monday morning, comes back on a Thursday evening. I mean, it's a big sacrifice in terms of just personally and from a family standpoint. But, you know, my family has gone into it eyes wide open. We know it. My wife has been very, very supportive. My family has, and said, hey, we're at a critical time. We know that we need good people in office, and we're willing to make the sacrifice because this country is almost out of runway, guys. We're almost, you know, I started my candidacy. When I launched my candidacy, we were 32 trillion in debt. We're now 35 trillion in debt.
Think of that.
We're going to go to 50 trillion, they project, by 2030. 2030, within the term of the Senate seat. And Senator Lee and I have had conversations, and others. They said, look, once we hit 50 trillion, we're going to trigger hyperinflation in this country. Those living on a fixed income are going to be incredibly hard hit. Watch out, you know, the value of assets, I think, is going to be completely undermined and destroyed. And so that's what we have to look forward to if we don't course correct. But we've got a very small runway, so we've got to have people that are in there. They're going to be America first. They're going to champion, you know, President Trump's agenda, America first, and be a constitutional conservative. Get us back to what our founders envisioned to be the proper role of government, which is in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. But unfortunately, we've gone so much more. The federal government has done so much more than that. I think that's another important part of my background, is one who's been in local government. I understand the proper role of government. I've seen all the duplication and layers of government from city, county, state, and the federal government, and how I've actually gotten our community out of some of those things. We self-provide at the local level, and it's always turned out to be less expensive, and we give a higher level of service. So, you know, if government's to be involved at all, it should be, you know, the federal government has those 18 things that have been articulated in Article 1, Section 8. If it's outside of that, it's left to the states, to the people.
And I think that's going to be a message that resonates loud and clear to Utahns. And I do just want to make a point. We do follow the comments here, Mayor Staggs. And a couple of people are saying, well, I thought Mitt Romney was dropping out. And just to reiterate what we said at the beginning of the show, if people are joining us, Mitt Romney is not running again, but you are basically getting Mitt Romney 2.0 and John Curtis and other candidates. At the end of the day, if it's Mitt Romney or another RINO, just like Jason and I say on the podcast, if it's Joe Biden or another Democrat, it's not so much the name, it is just the position of power that the establishment holds. So no, Romney is not running, but you can see a new Romney in the background here. And that's why Mayor Trent Staggs' candidacy is so important right now. Speaking about when you get to Washington, D.C., I have, you know, Jason and I said before the show too, I think he's going to win. Utah needs this. Utahns are waking up. Americans are waking up. What's kind of your game plan when you get to the Capitol? You've got your coalition of other senators that are America first. And how are you going to approach business on day one to let this message resonate with a wider audience?
Well, I think the first order of business is to elect a Senate Majority Leader that is not Mitch McConnell 2.0. And I'm committed to do that and work with this executive steering committee to get the right person in there. I know that Rick Scott indicated he wants to seek that leadership post. He had the courage to take on Mitch McConnell last go around. Rand Paul would be fantastic too. Somebody like that. So that would be the first order of business. We get back to process, border, budget, regulatory state. Those are the first three things. I think we can tackle them instantly. The border, let's get back to what worked with President Trump. Complete the border wall, stop worrying about and funding Ukraine and worrying about the borders of Ukraine, giving them $170 billion over finishing our own border. Let's finish our own border wall and get back to remain in Mexico. I think we need E-Verify, and we've got to cut off any benefits to illegal immigrants. That will largely take care of the problem. I think many self-deport as a result of that. President Trump has a deportation plan that we need to take a look at as well, because we've just been invaded. There's no other word you can use. We've been invaded with 10 plus million people. I mean, it's 3 times the population of my state. Utah's only at 3.2 million people. We've had 3 times the population of my state invade our country under President Biden. So let's get back to that border security immediately. I'll support in any way that we can to make sure that we shore that up. The budget, we talked about budgetary process already, getting back to that 1974 Congressional Budget Act that outlines those 12 appropriation subcommittees. That will help fix the budget. Let's get back to pre-COVID spending levels right away. We can cut a lot, but I think we could, at least Republicans can agree, let's get back to pre-COVID. Vivek Ramaswamy has put out his American Truth Pledge. He's endorsed my candidacy too. And, he's calling for a 75% reduction in federal employee headcount. I mean, and he shows how you can do it. There's so much duplication again in these federal agencies, and the Department of Education would love to get rid of that at the federal level. But you name it, there's a lot of places we can cut. And then thirdly, regulations. I mean, as a business owner and taking a company public, this is crazy. I mean, we are strangling business in this country and really suffocating many of the liberties and freedoms of individuals with all the regulation. Did you realize we have about 100,000 pages of new regulations that are passed every single year in this country, and they all have the binding effect of law? You go to Senator Lee's office, it stands about 4 feet tall. Every year, the last few years, he's got the regulations. Now, he wants to finish what's called the REINS Act, REINS, and you want to rein in the federal government agencies. I think many need to be completely eliminated, drastically reduced. But the REINS Act just says, hey, guys, look, you unelected bureaucrats, if you want to propose rules, that's fine, but they've got to come back to elected officials, and we've got to vote on them before they have the binding effect of law. It's common sense. It's constitutional. And that one act alone, where elected officials are on the hook, they actually have to vote for these regulations. That will significantly reduce the amount of regulation, in my view. And like I said, it's strangling business. It's a $4 trillion or more drag on our economy, all of these regulations. And we've got to cut many of them and streamline them, especially with respect to the oil and gas industry, and get back to energy dominance, because if we get back to less than $2 a gallon gasoline like we had under Trump, that and stop printing money will handle the inflation, this horrible Bidenomics and inflation that's afflicting Utahns. I mean, the average family here is $10,000 to $12,000 more a year they're having to pay because of inflation, which is a direct result of Biden's horrible, horrible policies and all this big spending and the energy policies that they've got. So those are the things we want to be able to do right away. And I think there's some really good consensus around it, and we can get to those pretty quickly.
I loved like 12 of those points you just rattled off. It was, it blows me away. We're still spending money at COVID levels. I mean, that money should have all gone away, but that's kind of the point with the federal government. Once you give them $1, it never goes away. So if you approve another $1, now you got $2. And it's the same thing with the federal head count. And that's where I want to kind of dig in. We love Vivek on this podcast. He's an outsider. Yeah. Nobody knows the Constitution, I think, better than him. And he talks about a 70% reduction in the federal government, you can just eliminate entire agencies because of the redundancy. I've seen his constitutional arguments about that. I've even seen where he says, okay, everybody pull out your social security card, evens get laid off today, odds stay employed, and then we're going to look at the half that are left. So as we talk about a lot of things, what's your number? Like, how much would you like to see the federal government reduced? And how much do you realistically think that it could? Because we all know they're not going to hit 70%. I mean, unless I'd love to see it, but I don't think it'll happen.
Boy, I'd love to see it at least cut in half. I think it's
think it that much.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's so much duplication in government. I mean, yeah, look at Vivek, what he was delineating there. I mean, the FBI, for example, half the agents don't do anything. The other half can be folded into existing agencies like the department, the DOJ or the Homeland Security. Agency after agency, get rid of the Federal Department of Education. There's no constitutional directive for it. I was back in DC a few months ago. I signed the tax pledge that I will not raise taxes. Grover Norquist at the Americans for Tax Reform. And he and I had a conversation. Did you realize there's over 200,000 employees that work in a clerical nature for the Department of Defense? They could be eliminated today with zero impact to national security. Eliminated today. And I'm like, why hasn't this happened yet? You understand the cost of keeping 200,000 people employed that are really just not even having an impact with respect to national security. For heaven's sakes, let's get rid of those folks. We were joking about it. Well, the reason it hasn't been done is because it hasn't been called the right thing. The left loves the terms like housing affordability. So we said we ought to call it the Northern Virginia Housing Affordability Act, and it would pass instantly. So, yes, there's a lot of areas where we can cut. There's a lot of duplication in federal agencies. And I would like to see us at least eliminate half of federal employees, frankly.
That would be fantastic. And as a mayor, you understand local government's always going to be better. So the more we can shrink federal government, get it down to the state, get that down to the municipal level, that's going to be better for every American in terms of freedom and what they're able to do with their own money, not get it inflated away. I want to pivot a little bit here. I wanted to get this question. I know you have 2 young kids. I have 2 young kids. You talked about now abolishing the Department of Education, which I fully support as a former elementary assistant principal. You look around the landscape here. You talk about inflation. You talk about woke ideology. As a father, what are some of the things you look around the nation, you say, I am terrified for my kids to grow up into this world? Like, what are some things just as a father you focus on?
Well, I mean, this is... And to your point, I mean, the state of Utah, for example, I've got some state school board members that have endorsed my candidacy. We get about 7% to 8% of our state educational budget is derived from federal dollars, but yet they control everything with Title I, everything. I mean, so they're controlling so much. And I've talked to some principals and others in administration, just the compliance costs alone, just to comply with all the federal regulations. They're not even sure if it matches the money we're getting, from the federal government. So we need to be able to cut that string, just ignore the federal government altogether. They should close that out. But, what I've been saying from day one since I launched my campaign is, as your next senator, I will champion every day 3 things: smaller, limited government, safer families, and a stronger economy. And with respect to the safer families, to your question, Department of Education, get rid of it immediately, the Federal Department of Education. Number 2, the Second Amendment. We have an inalienable right to protect ourselves and our families. And I've been endorsed also by the National Association of Gun Rights and a National Association for Gun Rights. And so the third thing that I talk about there is a separation between woke and state. I say we need a separation between woke and state. And that's what concerns me. We've got so much of this woke ideology that's been pushed down. It's been wholeheartedly endorsed by Biden. It's pushed down our military, our education, everywhere, you name it. What kinds of things? Well, we're talking CRT, DEI. We've got, the military funding drag queen shows or whatever nonsense that we see out there. I mean, this is absurd. And no, I mean, I hate the fact that Title IX, the Biden administration, what they've done to that recently, I think that's a quick fix in the Congress by just changing it to state biological. It's, if you're a biological male, you compete in male sports. You're biological female, you compete in women's sports. We're not going to leave this up to, this interpretation of, oh, I'm a trans person, I'm going to go compete, but I'm a biological male, I'm just going to go compete in female sports. I think that's ridiculous. It totally undermines and destroys all the supports and protections that females have in sports. I've got a 14-year-old son and a 12-year-old daughter. I don't want my daughter competing with biological males, for crying out loud, in the same sports. That's what
it's amazing. We've reached the peak of civilization in 2024 when adding the word biological male to or is A, required, and B, controversial. Like, I look at some of this stuff and I'm like, did people lose their minds? You were talking about redundancies and in the Department of Justice, some of the three-letter agencies. One of the things we're most passionate about is really the interference by your, three-letter agencies, alphabet soup. And we see it like we're business people. We create conservative content. Some of our content, we have to do Rumble only. Like, that's where our most views come from. We stream on Facebook and YouTube, and like YouTube isn't even worth hardly a streaming on because they're just going to suppress it. They're not gonna push the message, and we try to keep it pretty clean. And even on Facebook, the same thing, where but it all ties back to these government agencies pushing back on these tech companies. Right. Now we've seen it with President Trump with the 34 convictions. They want to tell us that the third ranking member of the Department of Justice really quit his job, which is a job that somebody works their entire career for, to go be an assistant prosecutor on a case in New York. And they say that with a straight face. And it's embarrassing. So how in the Senate can you help rein in these three-letter agencies that, in my opinion, are just ruining America?
They are. We need a majority, that's for sure. But, Congress has the power of the purse, and we should be able to stop funding these agencies, or at least what's called fencing, be able to fence it in to ensure that these types of practices and abuses, unconstitutional, weaponization of these agencies against people of certain ideology, it doesn't happen anymore. It's just shocking to me. You've got so many Democrats, all these people that are in the far left that are always calling for free and fair elections, right? That's their mantra. And they want to talk about election interference and all the nonsense that's been disproved with President Trump. The Russia hoax and collusion, that was easily disproved. With Kash Patel and Congressman Devin Nunes and digging into that. But the left always accuses us of what they themselves do. Right. And as being the only Trump endorsed candidate here in the state of Utah, when that bogus sham trial conviction came out, they wanted my comment. And I said, frankly, this is the greatest single example of election interference and election fraud in our nation's history. Period. This whole trial, they've been trying to politically prosecute and persecute this guy for years, and they know they have to get something because they can't beat him at the ballot box, and that's what this is all about. So we have to ensure that these types of abuses don't happen anymore, because number one, they're unconstitutional. It's horrible. They're making a mockery of our judicial system when they do these kinds of things. I say we've devolved into a third world banana republic judicial system, for crying out loud. And number two, it weakens our system across the board. I mean, people don't have faith in the judicial system anymore. They say, wow, if this can happen to a former president, what can happen to me? Well, obviously they can try to stack the deck in any which way they can. They get some corrupt DA who's made it his political campaign was to, quote, nail Trump. And then you get a corrupt judge, somebody whose daughter has been making tons of money off of this trial, who's a Democratic operative and fundraiser, for crying out loud. And then he gives jury instructions that are 55 pages in length and very complicated, and basically says the jurors don't even need to agree on I mean, what is this? This is nonsense. And, you know, the fortunate thing is I'm hearing from more and more people that aren't even what you would consider, you know, MAGA Republicans. They're independents. You know, I was on the phone yesterday with a good friend of mine, big, very successful business guy who's largely tried to stay out of politics. You know, he doesn't really opine much on it. But now that I'm running for Senate and he's wanting to support me, he's been following more closely. And he told me yesterday, he goes, Trent, this is insane. You know, as a fair-minded person, I think anybody takes a look at this trial and says, my gosh, it's completely politically motivated. And the outcome is just a farce. So I think he'll win on appeal. But, you know, the left got their little phony sham conviction, and that's what they want to take. They want to use that narrative and try to say convicted felon as much as they possibly can. It's just disgusting. I'm learning how, you know, the dishonest mainstream media works through this whole campaign too.
I was just going to bring that point up, actually. So we see what's going on with Donald Trump. He has famously said they're not really after him. They're after the rest of us, and he's standing in the way. So when you launched your America First senatorial campaign, you knew you were going to run up against the establishment, the media. I imagine you've experienced some of that so far. I imagine you were bracing for it. What's been your experience so far going up against the regime like that?
Well, you know, when I explained a little bit about the caucus convention system and how $50,000 was spent trying to attack me from this DC dark money pack, I started getting attacked and had fake news stories thrown out at me from about February through the end of the convention because I came out very much against Mitch McConnell. I said months and months ago, even before he said he wasn't going to seek a leadership post, that I'm a no vote. I'm a quick no vote on McConnell. He's endemic to the problem in Washington, D.C. The go along, get along. He gets co-opted by the left far too often. He compromises consistently. He doesn't adhere to process, as Mike Lee pointed out. So I was very outspoken against McConnell and the establishment. And as a result, I get all kinds of hit pieces that were thrown at me in the news, and then these attack ads. And I got to tell you, I've learned their game. I mean, they would come after me. They would contact my campaign team, these fake news outlets, and they would say, hey, we're just reaching out for comment on this thing or that thing. And they write the headline. I found they write the headline before they write the story.
Right.
And they want to be able to sell a headline because they know that that's what most people, that's all they're ever going to look at. And then they'll try to use that in a way. So they find these campaigns or these dark money groups, they'll find dishonest reporters that will just put out not even a half truth in most instances. This is an out and out lie. And then they'll write a story and somewhere, you know, they'll put my comment, but that's what I've found. We've experienced that sadly. And, you know, we just have about 2 weeks to go in this primary. We've got to get across the finish line, and we're hopeful that Utahns will see the juxtaposition of somebody like me versus a Mitt Romney 2.0 and John Curtis.
Yeah, you know, I got to say it was funny because we did an interview on my Monday through Thursday podcast with you early in your candidacy, and we kind of talked about that, and it was interesting to see, like, a few weeks later the hit pieces come out, and you know, we'd reach out to people, you know, like, hey, yeah, this isn't true, Trent's a really good guy, and you didn't have the Trump endorsement yet, but now that carries a ton of weight. Like, that's a big vetting for MAGA. Now, on the more positive side, so you were a normal guy, you were a mayor, and now in the last 6 months, you've got to interact with what I view appear to be some of the coolest people that are serving American people in Washington. You know, between Mike Lee, I saw you were traveling with Matt Gaetz, phone call with President Trump. Other than President Trump, tell us, who is the coolest person you've got to hang out with and interact on this campaign battle?
Oh, man, there've been a lot. You know, Carrie Lake came out early in September, did a fundraise event for us out here, very much down to earth. I mean, just the real deal. Congressman Matt Gaetz, you know, I thought he was fantastic coming out here, just very easy to talk to, very cool. Boy, I mean, Rand Paul, you know, I went back and spoke with Senator Tuberville in DC and also Senator Paul about the same time. You know, Senator Tommy Tuberville, great guy.
Oh, he's awesome.
I mean, just down to earth, just, people can call him coach. He actually prefers the title of coach over senator. He said, it's just, so I don't want to count anybody out. There's a number of great people that have come up, that have endorsed, that have supported my campaign. And yeah, that's who I want to go back and work with. That's what I tell people. They ask me, they go, man, you've got a lot of endorsements. These are amazing. I mean, you've got incredible endorsements. Even non-political. I picked up the endorsement of John Stockton, one of the great basketball players of all time.
Right. That should win Utah right there.
Yeah, from the Utah Jazz. I got introduced to him by a mutual friend, and he really admired my COVID policy as a mayor. I never locked down our city. We didn't subscribe to any mandates or lockdowns or anything. So he really loved that. And he's an incredibly down-to-earth, just really cool guy. So there have been so many. And I've told people, I've intentionally sought these endorsements because these people have demonstrated a willingness to stand up to the establishment, like I think I have in my time as mayor, and also being the only one willing to challenge Mitt Romney.
Right.
So I want to surround myself with people like this because they're going to keep me true. That's a question I get asked a lot. They're like, well, Trent, you're great. You're you've got this great background, average, normal guy, but we vote for people too often that go back to DC and they just become part of the establishment. Like, how do we know that's not going to happen to you? And I just say, look at what I've done in my community as mayor, and look at the people that I've asked for endorsements, and my willingness and my pledge to join the Freedom Caucus equivalent of the Senate. These people are going to hold me accountable. I mean, when Tommy Tuberville was out here, he told a big crowd, we had a couple of big rallies, and he told a crowd, he said, if Trent doesn't vote right, he's the guy. But if he doesn't vote right, I'll send his butt home. Is what he said in one of our rallies. And yeah, so you need to have, look, Washington, D.C., it's a swamp. It has a highly corruptible influence there. Let's not kid ourselves. It's not the best of environments. You've got to find people that you can work with that are going to hold you true and hold you true to your word. I mean, the voters will hold me accountable here in the state of Utah, but the folks that I want to associate with, you're as good as the company you keep, and that's why I've sought the endorsements that I have.
I couldn't help but hear when you talked about Matt Gaetz and Kari Lake just being genuine, authentic, and down to earth. And you're billing yourself as a regular American, and that's absolutely who you are. I would counter and say you're not regular because you have courage. I don't think most Americans have any courage whatsoever. But just as a hardworking, self-employed, business-creating American, raising a family, raising kids, being a father, my impression is always when you meet these conservatives, yes, MAGA is billed as, Biden calls us extremists and terrorists and a threat to this nation, but I walk down the street. I've got a street full of MAGA neighbors. I got the Trump signs out here. The nicest, kindest, most authentic human beings you will ever find. Any interaction with a leftist, I don't know what to think of them because I don't know who they are or what they believe. And so it's always interesting to, we get you on here. We know what these other MAGA conservatives are like. And then, it's the complete opposite of how the media represents them.
100%. Yeah. These people love our country. They love our country. And it was shocking to me. I heard on a radio program just yesterday that they polled over half, well over a majority of Democrats would not stand up and defend this country if we were attacked. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? After all the blessings that we've been afforded in this country, I mean, that to me is just remarkable. They wouldn't even stand up to defend this country. They were talking about it because yesterday was the anniversary of D-Day, and that's who these so-called extremists are. They're just people that love this country. Mm-hmm. They don't want to see it drift from its foundational principles that has made it the envy of the world. And that's what I said in my speech at CPAC. I was asked to speak there, and I said, we need leaders that care about everyday Americans. And that's what is, President Trump. And I cited the example, not just all of his great policies, right? Because I love the 2017 tax cuts, the less than $2 a gallon gas, the energy policy, strength on the world stage, great Supreme Court nominations. But he cares about everyday Americans. I see it. I see it when I talk to him, when other people that I know of him talk about him. But then I witnessed it in my own community because one of my residents, Josh Holt, was imprisoned in Venezuela during the Obama years. And it wasn't until President Trump came into office that he was able to secure his release and get him out of a hellhole, quite literal hellhole of a jail cell that the Maduro regime, the socialistic government, had him in for no reason whatsoever. And so that's the example that I share with folks. People love America. President Trump loves this country, and he's going to fight for everyday Americans every single day.
You know, it's fascinating you say that, because President Trump, we don't always agree with politically. Sometimes he does things and we're like, I don't know about that. Sometimes, but at the end of the day, we want people that go in that just want to do what's best for America. And you had touched on something really powerful earlier. I think the biggest threat to the nation is our debt and our spending. Yes. And if you look, BRICS now controls about 40% of the world reserve currency status. You know, we're adding trillions of dollars. The debt ceiling is paused until after the election. And I mean, that's why the economy numbers keep looking good, because we just keep printing trillions of dollars, $1 trillion every 100 days. And Americans see it. And that's what's crazy is we all go buy groceries. We know a grocery bill used to be $200, now $250. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to do it. So how painful, though, do people need to understand what this spending is going to do? Because if we don't stop the spending, I mean, it's catastrophic. And even if we adjust the budgeting short term and there's a little pain there, like paint to them what this end picture that you described earlier looks like.
Look at a country like Venezuela. You know, look at these countries that have experienced hyperinflation, runaway inflation. That's what you're looking at. I mean, in very short order, under Chavez, you know, Venezuela has a lot of oil, natural resources. They were doing very well. Then they bring in socialists into power, and you know they nationalize, expropriate business, and make it a ward property of the state. They're hard pressed to get good groceries at the store, get just staples every day, toilet paper, things like, I mean, their country has been just run into the ground. And that's what poor leadership, socialistic government, and a printing press will do to your money. And so we don't want to go there. I mean, I know some people from Venezuela that have come here. One of the most emotive experiences was just about 2 years ago, October. I had a good friend that came here from Venezuela, and he had his naturalization ceremony. And he invited me, he invited Senator Lee to it at our state capitol. And that's what he is, just literally in tears, saying, I'm seeing what's going on in this country. And it's a mirror image. It's exactly what happened in Venezuela. You do not want that. We need to heed those types of warnings. These people that have lived through that, they have lived experience under hyperinflation and socialistic governments. Let's not let that happen here. We need to be able to stand up right now and prevent that from happening.
It always makes me wonder, too, when you see this happening. We look around the landscape. I'm just a regular guy. I'm trying to work, take care of my family. And I think I can figure this out. I have pretty easy solutions: cut spending, cut government. It seems like that would take care of a lot of problems. Is it intentional or is it incompetence? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's intentional. I mean, you got the left that they really want to fundamentally change America. They've told us what they want. That's why they're sick and tired of waiting. They're just letting the borders remain wide open and letting this country be invaded. And they want to literally bankrupt the entire country and socialize it. So I believe by many that are in positions of power that it's intentional. And I think there are some people that are, it's just they're unwitting accomplices to the whole thing. And they need to stand up too. You can't just say, well, I'm a good moral person. You've got to be able to also be wise. We need to elect people that are good, honest, but also wise to the reality of the situation and to when other forces are trying to co-opt them and manipulate them. So let's stop it. We've got, as you said, I think it's a simple solution. It's not rocket science. We just got to have people that have the moral courage. And you said, I agree with you. I think it's sad, but it's true that it's in relatively short supply these days. We don't have enough people that have the moral courage to stand up and say, no, Let's get back to our founding principles. Let's get back to the Constitution. Let's stop all this crazy spending. Let's protect our own borders. And we have to have people that have that kind of courage and that will speak truth, the truth. There isn't your truth and my truth. There is the truth. Let's get back to it. That's what universities used to be able to, used to try to pursue, for crying out loud. But now everybody seemingly has their own truth. It's just, let's get back to what is actually, seeking the truth.
It's interesting you say that, because I found myself as a young man, I favored Republicans' principles, but I thought they were corrupt and owned by big business. And the Democrats, even though they had stupid ideas, they at least felt like the honest party. And that is completely reversed, where Democrats are now the party of all these insane policies, plus they're just bought out by big corporations and big tech. So I pray that when you get to Washington, D.C., you can find a couple sane Democrats, because I can't find one anymore. Like, we used to have a couple from Minnesota that okay, your policies are kind of dumb, but you at least love America. Meanwhile, you've got these America-hating Democrats on the left. So that'll be my challenge for you. See if you can find an honest Democrat. But thank you so much for being on our show.
Thank you.
What can Todd and I do? What can our audience do to help push you over the finish line these next couple weeks? Where can people follow you? Give us the 411 before we get you out of here.
Yeah, people can go to TrentStaggs.com, STAGGS, TrentStaggs.com to support, donate. We have thousands and thousands of individual donors. Again, I'm not funded by DC super PACs and lobbyists and, billionaire climate change guys like my opponents are. So I really, really rely on the support from the grassroots. And, if you're from Utah, if you've got friends in Utah, encourage them to support my candidacy. We can't elect a Mitt Romney 2.0. And that's really the choice that we've got in front of us today.
Yeah. Mayor Staggs, we appreciate you coming on so much on this podcast, trying to get your message out to our audience and as many Americans as possible. Unfortunately, we are alive and in Minnesota. Otherwise, we might be casting a ballot for you out in Utah.
Well, thank you
Minnesota,
so much.
we got our own problems. Awesome. Well, on that note, folks, support Mayor Staggs. Your next election is June 25th?
June 25th. Yeah, just a little over 2 weeks away.
2 weeks away. So push hard, get the word out here, help share this show. We need American first fighters like Mayor Trent Staggs in the Senate. That's how we're going to save this country. And Mayor Staggs, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. We really appreciate it.
And good luck in the rest of the campaign.
Good luck.
Thank you.
All right, we'll figure out our background here shortly. There you go, folks.
Giddy
Mayor
up.
Trent Staggs. This is the exact kind of individual we need in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I was going to say one of our missions in doing this podcast, we call it freedom from the press, but it's how can we get word out? And let's put this in perspective. The Republican establishment has already spent $10 million going after this guy. $10 million. 70% of the delegates voted for him. So he's clearly wildly popular in Utah. And this is I don't want to say a guaranteed seat. Things can always happen. But it's kind of like in Minnesota, they're going to elect a Democrat many times. Like, we're outnumbered in the cities. But Utah, 60% voted for Trump. Like, that should be a pretty easy get for the Senate. Why on earth is the establishment sending $10 million when that money could be going to nationwide campaigns or campaigns that are toss-ups, or, Carrie Lake's going to be in a dogfight? Like, send that money out to Arizona. It's crazy.
Yeah, it just it confirms what you already know. This is the man we need in D.C. because the establishment is terrified of him winning.
Right. Well, on that note, Todd, hopefully everybody liked the change of pace today with the interview. Mayor Staggs, he's going to be a great guy. Personally, I think he's going to win. I think that, God's behind us in this election, and with people stepping up to make a difference. And that's one of those things too. Todd and I talked about, we kind of quit our corporate job so we could help try to make a difference in the world. You think you've stepped out to do something, Trent? Like, dude had a great job, a great business, nice family. And then he became a mayor, and he's challenging Mitt Romney, which is and he declared too, and that was a point I made early. He declared before Romney said he wasn't running again.
He was going to take on Romney directly.
Yeah, I mean, next to Mitch McConnell, can you imagine going up against any other senator that would be more swampy than Mitt Romney? It's insane.
That takes courage right there. But folks, thanks for tuning in today. And another shout out to Trent Staggs. Thanks for coming on, Mayor Trent. Folks, we're back here next Friday, same time as always, 10 a.m. But thanks for tuning in today and have a great weekend.
See you next time.